explaining the compost today. I already harvested the compost, and we had these here are geo bins. They're essentially 3-foot diameter by 3 foot tall, the perfect shape for a good pile. We had one of these that we've just been filling all through the winter, late fall, into the spring, with everything, plant materials, you name it, coffee grounds, food scraps, grass, leaves, twigs, plants, everything, anything and everything biodegradable. That's plant organic material. This is the bin that I got all that compost from, and it was a hot process compost that I actually turned. And if you watch Ray Praxxus's video, I essentially kind of followed that same method, but though it was not as intense as he did, so it took a lot longer. And I screened it out and got the sticks and twigs out of it and everything, and that's what filled those 4 big containers. And I've been using that. I'm almost out. This container here is the one that we've just been piling and filling and doing sort of a cold compost method. Now I've taken, what I've done now, since this one was empty, is I've taken all the undecomposed material out of this with my pitchfork, and I've gone ahead and put it back into this one, which has helped stir it. Plus I've added some composted material. As you can see, the dark stuff, that's pretty much compost. And there's layers of green and browns and all that kind of stuff. So I've got this started. And then I'm going to go ahead, this is going to be my harvest down here. This is pretty much compost, dry leaf material and some twigs, and there are some undecomposed mats of leaves and things. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to harvest what I can out of this, because if you don't do anything about it, you know, eventually it's just going to degrade and just it'll be gone. It'll go down into your soil over time. You won't have, I mean, it'll just be reclaimed by the earth. So you got to can't leave it forever. You know, you got to get down in there and start claiming that stuff before the earth does. You know, be able to put it in your garden. This is just full, absolutely full of worms, which is great. We all love to see worms, and those guys and their cocoons and all will be transferred to wherever I put this compost. So that's great if I use it, you know, pretty soon. So I'm going to go ahead and harvest this and screen it. That's some compost. Here's another, right there. And you'll also get these little guys that curl up. They're kind of like, that's a baby one, baby grubs. Let me see if I can, yeah, look here. These little guys, they break it down too. They're all good. Don't be afraid of them. They're all doing a great job. Here's another. Yeah, see, there's another big worm. So, yeah, that's a good sign, okay? That's a really good sign. And try not to hurt these guys too much. You know, I'm screening compost, but I'm trying to be careful of not chopping them all up at the same time. And where there's worms, there's cocoons. And these guys produce like unbelievable. And these are, I'm not sure these are red worms or earthworms. Earthworms and red worms are 2 different things. Red worms are the type that you use in your like worm bins and stuff. And they stay pretty much near the top of the soil and eat and just, you know, kind of burr down and stay moist and do their thing. Earthworms are a total different thing. They'll come from way down in the soil. You know, they'll go 2 foot deep, no problem, or more. And they'll come up to the top, they'll grab material, and they'll take it down those tunnels, and that's how they aerate that soil. And, but there's a good chance there may be some red worms in here, just from where I've, you know, had old pots and things that had some of my red worms from my compost and cocoons, and so there's probably a mix in here. But I think most of these are earthworms, I'm not sure. Okay, a little change of plan. I've got, you know, I got an initial 4 or 5 shovelfuls up here on my screen, mainly from the top of the pile. But there's so many worms in it, which I'm used to having worms in my compost and all, but there are so many per shovel that I don't want to sit here and start screening this stuff and tearing them up. So what I'm doing is I'm going to screen up a little bit to use in some potted things that I have, and then the rest of it I'm just going to harvest it and put it in some containers and let them continue to do their thing. While it's mostly pretty much compost, there is still left, and they're having a field day in it and having fun, and I don't want to spoil the party. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and harvest this stuff, and there's quite a bit. I'll go ahead and take like some of this matted up leaf matter and throw it in my compost pile. sift through it a little bit with my fork, and then harvest what's left, and let those guys continue to do their thing in an open container outside in the shade. I've leveled out the pile. I've taken one container full of stuff, and I've put some leaf matter and stuff in there with it for them to keep eating. Every shovelful was just full of worms. Unbelievable. I've had worms, but not that many. And you know, I mean, they love that straw and leaf matter. They sure do. There's holes in the bottom of this container, by the way, so there's drainage and whatnot, so I can leave it out and let them continue on in their little environment here and be all happy. I've leveled the ground out level. This was hard clay. You could hardly get a shovel halfway in. I can just take my hand now, and even you see the clay? The clay is full of worms, and there's material all in that clay. You can see compost material mixed in the clay. It's breaking it down. But just to show this, I mean, this is clay, hard clay, and I mean rock hard to dig in anywhere else. I can just shove that shovel down in there, and it's just busting up that material. They're doing their thing. And I don't know if you can see it, but little worms squirming around, and it's amazing what this compost will do to the hardest soil. And I'm just going to let that go, let it do its thing. My bin will be set back up on here when I transfer back to this bin. And those guys will come up through there just happy as can be and chow down. So yeah, I just harvested one bin, and it turns out that these are 30 gallon. So I had 4 30-gallon containers from my last compost attempt. Those compost tumblers are a joke. Forget about it. Nothing can produce compost like a pile. You don't need anything. Ray Praxxus, he's proved that himself. He's shown you in a month how much compost you can create. Those tumblers are a joke. And the big problem with tumblers is that they break up the stuff so bad every time you turn it. It actually needs to kind of form layers in a web, especially the fungi. The fungi form an actual, like a cobweb through the material. Every time you tumble and break that stuff up, it's got to reestablish itself. Well, it's busy reestablishing itself rather than doing what it's supposed to be doing. So nothing beats a pile. There's just no way. And those tumblers are probably the least effective, unless it's just all you can do, and you just have a little yard, and maybe your neighbors don't like seeing a pile, and the only choice you have is a tumbler or something like that. Then by all means, at least do that. But to be honest, it doesn't touch a pile. It makes so little compost, and it gets wet and moist, and there's not good aeration, and it's just not the good stuff, you know. This is the way to do it. Pile it up, layer it, and let it do its thing. The more you toss it and mix it, keep it just lightly moist, lightly moist. It doesn't have to be in the sun. That's another misconception that a lot of people have actually asked me, does it need to be in the sun to cook? No, that has nothing to do with it cooking. It's the process. It cooks internally. The sun has nothing to do with it. It doesn't matter if it's in the sun or the shade, but you're going to have to keep that moisture. And I found in my experiences that being in a more shaded area really seems to work much better. It doesn't dry out as quick. It doesn't get as hot. The worms aren't burrowing down so deep because it is so hot. The worms don't like heat, obviously. They come later, after it's starting to break down, or before it's breaking down. Once it gets hot, man, they scoot. So keeping it out in the sun is really not helping. These geo bins are really nice. You can get them on Amazon and places like that. Very simple, but so effective. And it's about 35 bucks a piece or something like that with shipping and all. I got 2 of them, and man, they've paid for themselves, no problem. As I mentioned, I made just this spring. I had 4, what was it again I said, 30-gallon? Yeah, 4 30-gallon containers, of compost now. Rich, completely finished compost. I've used it all. I've poured it all in my beds and everywhere, and I've got a little bit left that I've been making compost tea and stuff with and all. And that's what I screened. This is some more I haven't put in the container, but I kind of screened it out a little better, and then I use that for compost tea. I kind of stopped on this because I was chopping up worms so badly. I just can't do that. I don't have the heart. But I got enough out of there to make some good tea. My little spot I got ready for my monster tomato contest entry, and as you can see, there's some straw compost on top of it. Underneath here is compost, and then another layer of straw. And there's some lime and some amendments and things as well. Plus, I still come out and I actually, when I'm spraying my fish seaweed sprays, I'll come around here and spray some down in here too. And just turning the soil into a mega rich little location here for my monster tomato to grow in. Absolutely. And I just pile it up around my pole. Just let them do their thing. And look out. I can guarantee I'm going to grow a nice plant. I can't guarantee I'll grow the biggest tomato, but it's going to be one heck of a plant growing here. I got my screened up stuff that was about 4 shovelfuls, 4 or 5. I got the sticks and twigs, and I even found some bits of plastic and junk in it. Not sure how it gets in there, but it does. And there's about 4 good shovelfuls. And look at that. I mean, that is enough to make the gardener wet his pants right there. That is so rich. Can't distinguish anything in it. You can't tell what's leaf from twig or food or anything. That is sweet. That is some nice stuff. Wow, I could sit here and play in this all day. I went ahead and quit screening right away after I threw the 4 shovelfuls or whatever in here. Worms were getting cut up, and I just can't do that. Evil worm killer guy. So, I just got what I needed for as far as making tea and stuff. And I still have, let me show you my other bin. This is the left of it, which is not much. And I've dumped some, a couple of old little pots of soil and stuff in here so you can see some particles of perlite. But this is pretty much same stuff, just a little drier. That keeps a little better. You do want to, if you're going to keep your compost, you want to let it aerate, and you want to reduce the moisture content considerably from when you harvest it typically. If you're trying to keep it, keep it for long term, you want it to be it doesn't feel moist, but it feels cool in the hand. That's about the ideal storage. This has been stored, I harvested all this in late or early winter, actually, when it was still warm. So, and this was just one of 4 containers completely chock full. So, that stuff's all in my garden now. And I've gave a lot away. My mother's a big fan of compost. She loves it. So I give her all tons of compost all the time. In fact, about every time she comes over, I give her more compost, and she's as happy as I couldn't give her anything more to make her happy. She sees the results, and she's not a huge gardener. She's mainly grows flowers and things like that, but she says, that compost, son, that stuff is just fantastic.